Yeah, like my hope is that we'll just be sitting here, right, with our faces kind of zoomed in, and then we'll say, like in this book, and then, or like this book, or like, just have,
Like this book.
yeah.
I did,
Oh yeah, there you go.
I hope it didn't look like I was flipping you off because I wasn't.
Oh no, isn't that the Italian way?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so I wanted to do a quick test.
Mic test.
So, I wondered if it would be okay and not against copyright. You know how we can share screens? So I'm kind of a professional in Zoom these days.
Oh man,
Oh yeah, self-proclaimed too.
that's awesome. The Zoom specialist.
So I'm going to share my screen and I just want to know, can you see this?
Yes.
All right, so can you hear this?
No.
So you can't hear the audio.
No. It looks pretty good though, but no, I can't hear the audio.
Hang on. I think there's a setting. Share computer sound. Man, how about this?
And that is this increasingly vocal attack on the Second Vatican Council.
Yeah.
So can you see this box where you see our faces?
Yep.
Oh, okay, so let me see if I can make this bigger. Okay, so I'm just kind of experimenting how we would present the video. Yeah.
I'm practicing my horrified faces.
Can you pretend that like wait.
Joe Rogan reacts.
This is good. This is really good. Okay. I'm going to stop recording and then hit record.
By the way, anytime there's a Joe Rogan reacts video, I click on it.
Well, I mean, I honestly think we could try it this way, right? We are reacting to these two videos.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I guess we'll figure out the copyright later. No need to bother ourselves with.
Yeah. All right, let's kick it off.
All right, cool.
So what are we talking about? We're talking about two videos.
Hey, Jeff.
Hey, what's going on?
How's it going, man?
Hey.
I haven't seen you in a while. How are you doing?
Good. We're staging a greeting.
Oh, I was actually greeting you, man.
Oh, okay. So we're trying this out, right? We're experimenting, but we have a lot of conversation to catch up on.
Yeah. I mean, obviously you're aware of all the fireworks that are flying with Vatican II, Bishop Barron, Taylor Marshall, other people that I don't know their names, just firing shots left and right. And, the faithful like ourselves are just kind of caught in between. So yeah, I wanted to see what your thoughts are on the banter, on the fireworks that are flying.
Yeah, it feels like mommy and daddy are fighting, and they're both asking us, "Who do you love more?" Like, how am I supposed to choose? I grew up listening to Bishop Barron, right? I grew up in my faith, kind of, listening when he was Father Robert Barron, and I, listened to him, and then I also recently in the last couple years started listening more to Taylor Marshall, especially during the McCarrick scandal.
Yeah, I think that's when he rose to fame.
So, where we are now is here we have two seemingly polarizing figures talking about, this is also another debate, right? This has been a debate about whether the Second Vatican Council had any questionable teachings or ambiguous teachings. So that's a question. And B, whether it was implemented as it was supposed to or whether there was some sort of hijacking and we had this great architectural plan and we ended up building a shantytown. So what happened? So anyway, we watched a couple videos at your suggestion, and I have a lot of thoughts and even emotions reacting.
What are the two videos?
Okay, so the first video is this virtual Napa conference uh, given recently by Bishop Barron, and on it, his topic was on the Second Vatican Council, and really weighing in on the current situation in social media in particular. That there are people, in the traditional realm who are questioning, maybe the validity. There are people who question the validity, but I think there's a spectrum, is what he's kind of bucketing everyone into one place.
Right.
Like, so that's the first video.
Yeah.
Second video. What's the second video, Ralph?
Taylor Marshall indirectly responding to that Napa Valley talk. It was done after the fact, and I think the video is titled Bishop Barron, Vatican II, Archbishop Vigano, and Pope Benedict. I mean, he just kind of threw everybody in there.
Yeah, it was like a versus video, right?
Right. And
Vigano versus everyone else.
And I mean, Taylor Marshall is a really big Vigano fan. And so, I think it's not surprising where he stands there, but I thought it was an interesting video and worth discussing.
So let's jump in on it. The first video with Bishop Barron, I was re-listening to what he said today, what he said in that video today. And I gotta say, like, I think Taylor Marshall and Archbishop Vigano are really just talking past each other. I don't see any kind of engagement, even though they've asked each other to debate in person or virtually.
You mean wait. You mean Bishop Barron and Taylor Marshall?
I'm sorry, Bishop Barron. Yeah, not Vigano.
Okay.
Yeah. So Bishop Barron, like his points that I listened to. So that we should never question the council. Like it has settled teaching. It's the highest. The ecumenical council is the highest form of teaching or certitude.
Yeah.
And that anything that it's said is off the table for reconsideration.
Right.
So
there's no revisiting necessary. It is what it is.
Right. No matter how much you don't understand it, it stands in and of itself. But then there's the question of interpretation, where I don't know if some folks are familiar with something called the hermeneutic. What Pope Benedict and Cardinal Ratzinger also called the hermeneutic of continuity versus the hermeneutic of discontinuity or rupture. So there's different layers, right? It's either the food that we made, no, it's great. It's just we were delivering it and we dropped it. It's got some stuff on it on the way there, or it's maybe a step behind that, right? And so like we dropped it on the way. That's poor implementation.
Right. Interpretation
would be, yeah, I thought the recipe said that to add 12 eggs. I added egg whites. So now this, yeah, I'm sorry, I messed it up from the beginning. Yeah. But then the analogy goes further by saying, yeah, and so now what we've done is we've taken this, this meal this recipe I've created, and we've taught everyone else in this party how to make this meal. And we've told them to tell everyone else that this is how you're supposed to do it. So this is where I question whether Bishop Barron is operating under the guise that people trust the church anymore. I mean, like, is he really operating underneath that? Like guys, no, it's cool. Like, cause he's basing the validity of the Second Vatican Council teachings or her documents on her authority, which I accept her authority. But the average Catholic is going to have this embedded expectation that there's integrity, that what you worship, what you believe also affects how you live. And when you have bishops who are paying off for returning hundreds of thousands of dollars back to your diocese for laundering, I mean, nothing surprises us anymore. And so this is what we're asked. This is, for me, in my opinion, what I would question back is, as he, I'm not a consequentialist in philosophy, meaning we measure the value of an act by its effect. Rather, it's by the nature of the act. So I'm not there. I think what Bishop Barron is getting at, and I'm going to turn it to you, get your thoughts, and let you chime in on how you reacted to it as well, is that he seems to think that we're being consequentialist about the effects of the Second Vatican Council, therefore, ergo, the teachings were bad. I think it's more nuanced than that, and I think the average Catholic is somewhere between Bishop Barron and Taylor Marshall today.
Yeah.
Right now, the fight for the middle is what's happening. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah. So, but what would you say is your hot take? Second Vatican Council, friend or foe? How big of a role did it play in what you could say the mess that we find ourselves in?
Yeah, I mean, after learning more about some of the players, as Bishop Barron likes to call them, some of these other bishops who, you got Cardinal Alfrink, you have Archbishop Bonini. These folks played a major role in the shaping of these documents, and especially what most of us are really asking about is, how did we get this liturgy, right? If this was a pastoral council, this is my hot take, this pastoral council needs a repastoral fitting. If we say that this liturgy was came from a pastoral council, well then, for the same pastoral reasons, my hot take is that we should go back to the traditional Latin Mass. So accepting the authority, right, of the Second Vatican Council, like what she says based on the authority versus what happened, I'm at the place where I still think it was poorly implemented, but I don't think it was unintentionally poorly implemented. I think it was intentionally poorly implemented. Intentionally implemented as we see it today.
I see.
So
you would make a distinction between the actual content of the council and the implementation. So what was bungled was not the content of the council per se, but more the implementation. But you're saying it was not just negligence, it was actually it was thrown. The game was thrown. They cheated.
yeah, exactly. And I mean, we can substantiate that now. Cardinal Ratzinger, in his book Milestones from Ignatius Press, even says in there that years later, after the Second Vatican Council, like in the late 70s, when he wrote his memoirs in 78, that rumor had started to circulate that maybe some liturgists, a liturgist or some liturgists, as the book is written, may have had a lot more influence than they should have, and did things to the liturgy that the Council Fathers would not have wanted. So just trying to take the data. So like I'm really trying to take a data-driven approach to finding the truth, because I think most of us are in the middle, and we're not ready to say out with that council and then question, papal sovereignty. But we're also in this dilemma with our current Pope Francis. We got Pachamamas in Rome. We got Amoris Laetitia, ambiguous teachings, which can be they're both being interpreted favorably by what you have, they're both being interpreted favorably by James Martin, Jesuit, and Bishop Barron. So it's like, how is a Catholic supposed to reconcile? How are we supposed to reconcile this? And you have Cardinal Burke, who's called this out, called out Amoris Laetitia, called the Dubia brothers, as we've heard from.
Yeah.
The Dubia cardinals who are offering a fraternal correction, asking for clarity. So asking for clarity. So we have a lot of things that we're trying to deal with that we've never dealt with before, and it's shaking us to the foundations of our ecclesiology, our fundamental theology, like the dogmas of the church. We're having to recheck, like, okay, so how do we apply it in this situation? So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, yeah, I think I would generally agree with everything you said. Um, there is a reckoning that needs to happen, or a reconciliation that needs to happen between what has become almost unbearable, all these transgressions in the church, right? You have the Mycaric scandal, the summer of shame, as some people call it. You have declining mass attendance. You have, you know, a minority of Catholics that believe in the real presence. You have the Pachamamas, you have the ambiguity, you have all these things you're trying to reconcile. You also have the reality that in most parishes, the Mass is just mediocre. It's pedestrian. It's not that transcendent, reuniting of heaven and earth that it's supposed to be. So at some level, you ask yourself, so was this the way it was supposed to be? Or did something go terribly wrong? And if something went terribly wrong, which, I mean, how can you not think that something went terribly wrong, given everything that we just listed? Why did it go wrong? And so I think it's only natural to ask yourself, well, did the council have anything to do with what we're living through today? Now, the answer may be no, it really doesn't. Or it may be maybe, partially, or it could be absolutely, right? I mean, there's a range of culpability you could assign to the council. So I think it's actually quite condescending in a way to have the faithful in this wasteland that we're somewhat living in. And I know that's a very strong word to use, but we're living in a church where the majority of Catholics don't believe in the real presence. I mean, to me, that should be alarming. There should be bells going off. Like, we should be really worried about this. And we should be, as a church, like really asking ourselves, like, how did this happen? How do we fix this? But I feel like, the study came out, a few months went by. I don't hear anyone talking about it anymore. It's just kind of, faded into the background. Oh yeah, that's what happens, But I would think we would want to, if this was a government problem, we would have an inquiry. We would have a congressional panel studying why 70% of Catholics don't believe in the real presence. But no one seems to care. I mean, where are the panels? Where are the speakers? Where are all the people talking about what should be a massive crisis of faith, right? So I think it's only natural for Catholics to ask themselves, like, how did we get here? What happened? What factors may have contributed to this? So for bishops and Bishop Barron to say, like, oh, no, we cannot look at the Second Vatican Council, that's settled teaching, it has nothing to do with the problems in the church, that may be true. But to say that we can't even question, that we can't even ask some pointed questions, some introspective reflection to see if there was any role, or if there was any, even if it was all misinterpreting of the council, you still wonder if there was no room for improvement, or if there wasn't just too much ambiguity, back to your point. So I guess the first issue I would take with Bishop Barron's position is this idea that, like, we should not be questioning the council at all. Like, we shouldn't even be raising the issue. And that feels a bit condescending, given all the question marks that we are surrounded by and the lack of answers from bishops and from leadership in the church.
What you said right there, the condescendingness, have you noticed this, that he gets really fired up when you attack the Second Vatican Council? He seems a lot more charitable to non-Catholic Christians in his videos. Like, he's inviting them. But as soon as
non-Christians.
Yeah, or just non-Christians as well. I mean, look at his talks on atheism. He's always trying to engage, by using atheist writers against them, right? You know, it's kind of a Balthasarian approach. You use Kant to bring in Kantians, you use Hegel to bring in Hegelians. You're trying to baptize all these things. But it's interesting that he's unable to baptize anything that the traditionalists say. He's unable to he's unable to relate to them, like, at all. Like, you're attacking the Second Vatican Council? Well, I mean, atheists are attacking whether Jesus is God. I mean, they're attacking moral foundations that influence our votes, right? So our votes for the next president. There's a lot of things at stake, and it just seems like his hill that he wants to die on is everything in the post-conciliar church. Whereas we've seen I mean, and I'm not trying to be consequentialist, you know, and someone will probably call me out saying, well, you're still being consequentialist. All I'm saying is, if we have so much more important things to talk about, and we're ignoring that for the sake of maintaining what, like, the validity of a council. I mean, it's not uncommon that more debates would happen after councils. I mean, so anyway,
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree that there is, at the very least, an amount of digestion that has to happen of the council. You know, like the council was promulgated by the church, guided by the Holy Spirit as it is. And now you have to be able to kind of understand what it is that you're being asked to do. So at the very least, there needs to be dialogue, because the council wasn't exactly clear on what needed to happen. So, like, this idea that, like, oh, there was all very, I don't understand why you don't, you just need to read it missionally and then you'll get it. It's like, well, I mean, if it was so clear, we wouldn't have so much confusion. You know what I mean?
there
Like, if
wouldn't
it was so simple, then why are we having such a massive, conversation about this? It would all just be very clear. And so, that's part of the problem. And I mean, just to clear the air and clarify things. I mean, I believe the council was promulgated by the Catholic Church, which was instituted by Christ, and therefore guided by the Holy Spirit. I don't think there's anything in the council documents that are objectionable theologically. I do think, however, that it was, and I don't even think that this is the fault of the council, because a lot of times councils were not meant to be exhaustive documents of instruction. But it certainly falls, there's fault to be assigned to the implementation of it. The council created these broad brush guidelines that in no way, I don't think, at least to my reading, violate church teaching. I would say that they changed emphasis, that they drew attention and light to different, just a different tone, or a different, I would say a different emphasis. So, and that emphasis ended up being significant. I mean, just to give an example, you talk about the understanding of baptism of desire, right? I mean, the idea that there used to be a very limited understanding of the baptism of desire, and the council kind of opens it up to this notion that, as long as you're seeking God with a sincere heart, then in a sense you're sneaking in through the back door of that clause of baptism of desire, or have the potential to be. So I think that you could say that that is technically fine, technically correct, but what did it result in? What did that change in emphasis create in the church? One of the concerns I have, just seeing the state of the church today, is our apathy towards mission work, our apathy towards wanting to go out and bring the Christian faith to our fellow man. It seems like the church for centuries was really zealous about baptizing new Christians, but the church of today doesn't have that same sense of urgency. We're kind of like, well, they could be saved, so they might be better off not knowing Christ. And that's like a really poor, kind of attitude to have. But I would say that kind of attitude is not uncommon in the church, to say like, well, they're good people. They're good people. They'll be fine.
Well, you can trace that apathy back to some of the theologians who were peritus or experts at the council, namely Karl Rahner. Karl Rahner was a big proponent of what's the fundamental option that no one inherently chooses hell. Therefore, are they going to choose something that's inherently against God? And so you have this kind of syncretism sinking in, and this theology of this may also come from von Balthasar's comment, which is it's becoming popularized now. The phrase "Dare we hope that all men be saved," and then the argument is becoming oversimplified with people coming out, trads coming out saying, outside of the church there is no salvation. So, well, there's a little bit of a nuance there in that conversation that needs to happen. I'm not going to get into that right now, but what I'm building the case around here is, with us being in the middle, there is a large amount of people who don't, like you said, don't know a lot of things about the faith, the apathy that you mentioned. And I can trace that all the way back. We can trace it all the way back to some of the experts in the council. And it may be that this camp, right? There were camps in the Second Vatican Council. The traditionalists, so to speak, they didn't call themselves that then, but traditionalists. And in the middle you had the Communio, and then on the far left you had the Concilium. One argument could be that a lot of this apathy, right, this pastoral way of trying to reach the world, was based on a mistaken, possibly intentional view of the human person, right? The signs of the times, right? Adopting the signs of the times, changing the church to the times, so that, trying to make, instead of being we're trying to make the church the universal adapter of so it's Catholic in that it can adapt to anything. And you see this in mistaken views of inculturation of the liturgy, right? Which is how we get the Pachamama. I mean, these are in my argument, and you'd probably agree to this, is that this is a natural progression of 60 years of this pastoral experiment. One point I would like to bring up, Bishop Barron did you hear what he said? If you look at the numbers of Catholics, it's gone up since the Second Vatican Council.
Yeah, he did bring that up.
But, so there's two studies that I encourage people to look at, and we should take a look at it on another discussion. One is CARA, C-A-R-A, the Center for Applied Research in the Apostolate by Georgetown University. They show that data that since 1965, the numbers in the church have gone up. But then you correlate that with the Pew study. Catholics are also leaving in droves, as well as not believing in the real presence, while numbers are going up. We're becoming a different church, is what, if we're filling the chairs, so to speak, if we're filling the pews with a different belief system, well, I mean, it's a different church. So, I mean, that's where I am now, and I'm looking at the data, and I'm looking at Bishop Barron's argument, and that'd be one criticism I have with him mentioning, oh, well, the numbers are going up. Well, the quality of numbers, like who's coming in, is the next question. We don't want to just have a bias and assume that.
Yeah, that's a bold statement, Cotton. I'm going different church. Yeah, I mean, I think, again, I mean, these are the kind of conversations that people should be having, because you're right. He does mention that. And yeah, I mean, if we begin to look at, so one of the things that I have a hard time reconciling, and that is, the liturgical changes and the claim that although they changed a lot, that we're still in continuity with what came before. And I just find that hard to believe and hard to buy. And there was a point in time in my life where that's all I knew, and I didn't know any better, so I was, I guess, perfectly happy or happy enough. But so one thing that I wonder, you always hear that the council was just poorly implemented, or when traditionalists bring up the fact that you have mass facing the people, communion in the hand, that you have these clown masses, that you have these abuses of the liturgy. What's the first thing that people will say? They will say, well, Sacrosanctum Concilium, there was nothing in there about that. There was absolutely, there's nothing about, the priest facing the people. There's nothing about abandoning Latin. If anything, it's the opposite. There's nothing about, abandoning Gregorian chant. There's nothing about communion in the hand. That's what they say, which, by the way, is totally true. But here's what I have a hard time with. The Pope Paul VI, who was at the council, who was essentially continued the council and saw it to its conclusion, was also the person in charge of creating the concilium, the committee that was in charge of creating the new liturgy. He was intimately involved in that development, and then he was a pope that promulgated the mass and said, this is the new mass and this is how we're going to do it, period, right? Okay, that new mass had a lot of changes. And guess what? A lot of those changes, maybe not at the first edition, but very soon after, included communion in the hand, because he allowed it through indult. It included mass facing the people. It included mass in the vernacular exclusively. That was kind of quickly became the norm after the council, right? So all these things begin to happen. All these dominoes begin to fall. Okay, so you could say, oh, well, but that was just a poor implementation. But then the next pope comes, St. John Paul II, the Great. Did he reverse those changes? Did he say, no, guys, we did it wrong. Like, we're supposed to be facing the altar. We're supposed to be having altar rails. We're supposed to be not doing communion in the hand. Now, did it improve? It improved some. But the vast majority of the liturgical changes that were made by Pope Paul VI were continued and guarded by John Paul II. And then, of course, comes Pope Benedict, whom I love. You know that. Papa Benedict, he's my guy. And of course, I think that he had the stroke of genius and inspiration of the Holy Spirit to, give the extraordinary form back, or the Latin Mass, back to the church. I think that was, and maybe I'll come back to that. But at the same time, Pope Benedict continued to preserve the vernacular exclusive Mass, facing the people, communion in the hand. They didn't change it. They didn't come back and say, no, guys, wait, we did it wrong. We got to fix it. We got to go back. They didn't. So what that signals to me, and by the way, people, now we have Bishop Barron and other bishops. I don't hear Bishop Barron saying, hey guys, no, we need to be facing the altar, or we need to stop communion in the hand, or we need to reintroduce Latin on a more regular basis. I'm not hearing that a lot. So what that to me signals is they're okay with the Mass the way it is. They think the Mass the way it is perfectly acceptable. Not only that, they guard it, they celebrate it, they do it Sunday after Sunday, right? So to me, the history of the changes that, now we have several popes that have continued the implementation of the council. We are living in the implementation of the council. And it doesn't sound like we got it that wrong, in the sense that the Mass is still generally the same. Did we eliminate some of the egregious abuses, like priests riding up on motorcycles down the aisle, which Bishop Barron brings? Yes, but are you serious? That's what you're going to point to? The fact that you got rid of these egregious abuses? The rest of the abuses, what you might call maybe lesser abuse, even though, that's, an abuse is an abuse, those still remain.
Soft core abuses.
Yeah. Not only do they remain, they're championed by the current church. So the reality is we are living in the Vatican II liturgy, because, that is every pope since, and the majority of the bishops since, have continued to celebrate the Novus Ordo in the way that it was promulgated, and very few of them have said, wait, we should do it differently. And when they do, like Cardinal Sarah, when he comes out and says, what would be a really great idea? Let's do Mass ad Orientem. And we
Well, be
can all
quiet, Cardinal Sarah.
together.
Get back to Africa. The African church doesn't know much, right?
So,
Isn't that what the German bishop said?
Yeah. So if you tell me that, no, Sacrosanctum Concilium didn't say anything about the priest facing the people, it didn't. You're right. But it seems like the establishment that came afterward, the arm, the executive branch of the Catholic Church, put the seal of approval on the Novus Ordo, and anyone who tries to return to the actual tradition of the Church, which is allowed by Sacrosanctum Concilium, is slapped down and told, nope, that is going back to preconciliar times, and we can't have that. That's what I have a hard time with.
So the argument that there is Pope Benedict has tried to say there is no preconciliar or postconciliar church. It's just the church, right? But the suppression of the 1962 missal and all rites before that was never was never done in the history of the church. There's never been a suppression. And we've talked about this. And so suppressing the missal, like you said, created a wall of, like a firewall to the past.
First time in history.
And so like this argument that there is a post-conciliar church, I think it has in large part to do with the fact that they stopped allowing us to use that old missal. And now, how many years later, in 2007, 40 years later, Pope Benedict issues Summorum Pontificum, which is, I think, the most underplayed document he's released. I think it's the most important outside of maybe Sacramentum Caritatis. Summorum Pontificum allows us that access and removes all barriers. Like, you don't need permission. And yet there's still bishops who are suppressing it, saying, oh, you don't have enough, or it's not pastoral. And so like you have, the pastoral police trumping, so to speak, the authority of the church that she says we have to submit to in the Second Vatican Council. This is what lay people are trying to reconcile. It's like if we have to be obedient to the church's past, are we being cafeteria Catholic by only selecting the documents that we want to be faithful to? I mean, Summorum Pontificum is part of the post-conciliar church. In fact, I think what we're seeing now for you and I, we're almost children of that document in that we love the traditional Latin Mass. We want to learn more about it. It's like finding like grandpa's old albums up in the attic. Like, Mom, why didn't you tell me about this? So, oh, that's because that was in the past. I mean, it's our birthright. It's something that belongs to us as well.
It does. Even though we didn't even know it existed only a little while ago.
Yeah, and now we're uncovering these riches, and we're also uncovering that this might be the traditional Latin Mass, the best answer to what the recent Pew study is showing about belief in the real presence, about the lack of religious. I think that's another statistic that's underplayed. Bishop Barron doesn't talk about the fall of religious numbers by 33 to 50%. I think it's 33%. And I immediately thought of how the devil swept a third of the stars in the sky down with him. This post-conciliar, quote unquote, post-conciliar church, we lost religious. Who cares if we got more laity? It's a different church. And this emphasis since then on the role of the laity. I can recall, Rafa, do you remember, I know some of the parishes that are out in the area that you used to live in where you grew up. And I remember chalices made out of non-precious metal.
Mm-hmm. I remember glass
chalices, wood, right? These are also abuses. And there were even within the Novus Ordo, two camps, right? It wasn't even the people that wanted to do motorcycle church masses. That was like, nobody wanted that. But there was, oh yeah, we have to use these materials versus this material. right? There was, what are we supposed to do with the corporal if we have spills? What do we do with the carpet if we drop Jesus or his precious blood? There was, even within the Novus Ordo, a marked disposition, and for whatever reason, at least in my life, um, I started to really come around toward understanding that we probably need more reverence in our liturgies. It just seemed so lackadaisical. The removal of meaningful, non-abstract, the removal of realist paintings or even classical art of the Stations of the Cross for some of these abstract art that's notorious in the great zeitgeist era of church architecture in the 80s and 90s. So I could go on and on, but I feel like that even within the Novus Ordo, I think that's the point I really want to drive home. There were still two camps: one that wanted reverence and understood the real presence, and the other that didn't. Regardless of ad orientem, this was before we even knew and had the concept of ad orientem. When I was an altar server, we knew that we had to have a greater sense of reverence towards the liturgy and the real presence. And honestly, the return of adoration, like adoration chapels started to pop up during that time as well. I don't know if you remember that. Like this, it seemed like the movement within, I would even say like the Life Teen Church that sadly we were a part of, even they understood that what they gave that was relatively new in the church after a long period of dry spells was the real presence, the rosary.
Definitely.
So anyway, I mean, I'm ranting, but I mean, stop me if I'm wrong.
Oh man, preach, brother. No. No, I mean, you're right. I mean, thankfully, the Holy Spirit continues to work in the church despite all of our human failures and all the confusion. I mean, there are streams in the church that continue to give life, and so we're thankful for that. And I mean, even the Novus Ordo Mass, as imperfectly as it is celebrated in many places, of course, still gives us the Eucharist, which is the source and summit of the faith, as John Paul II would say. But you brought up another interesting point, which was the notion that it's a different church. It's kind of it's no longer the same quality, the same. I don't know how to describe it. Like the first time I ever went to Extraordinary Form Mass, I remember being kind of angry.
Angry. Like, I can't believe they're still doing this. I'm just kidding.
Well, no, just because went to Mass and you're so used to it being about you, like you're so used to it being about getting people involved that you go, and it was a low Mass, of course. And I say of course because I feel like a lot of people's first experience is a low Mass, and then they get turned off by it. They're like, oh, this is horrible. So low Mass wasn't intended for, it's really a monastic kind of setting. So it wasn't intended for the public. And so you go to a low Mass and you feel like you're completely left out of it. Well, that's because you kind of are. But, going to a high Mass or a solemn high Mass, even better, you begin to see that there's a whole different quality to it. It's like you're going to a different religion. You're going to a completely different understanding of how worship works. And I had a really hard time. And honestly, to this day, I am still trying to wrestle with the idea that Mass is not about me, that it is about me uniting myself to the worship of God. And that it's a difficult concept because I've grown up thinking that Mass in a certain sense is also about me getting something out of it. Like you go to Mass and you're being taught a lesson or you're being this or that. But it's like in the old rite, the entire ceremony, the entire Mass is this great prayer that is solely focused on giving God glory. And as a layperson, when you're there, you have the privilege to participate in this most perfect act of worship. That's how you participate. You don't participate by getting something out of the reading or by, singing a song or something. You participate in insofar as you are subsumed into the heavenly choir singing praise to God. And that is such a different way to understand the Mass that honestly, I am still wrestling with because I'm not used to it. It is so foreign to me.
What do you think is going to happen in heaven? How much of heaven will be about us? This is not a challenge to you, but like it just hit me as you were saying that. Like,
I mean, I feel like if you kind of think about what heaven will be, in a certain sense, is that where you end and where God starts is no longer discernible, right? Like you become one with God, right? And so that is the liturgy. Like it's no longer like, well, what am I getting out of it? It's like, no. Like you are being subsumed into the exchange of love in the Trinity. So it's like, it's no longer Jeff, it's no longer me, it's no longer my wife. It's like we are all united in Christ and we are one. Like we no longer think of ourselves as like, personal, like what our personal work are or what we're going to have for dinner tonight. It's like we are solely, completely subsumed in the mind of God.
I think we're worshiping him, right? Where it's the eternal liturgy in heaven,
That's
right?
right.
Like
And that's what we're preparing for. We're preparing.
Yeah. And so if we're preparing for that, and I think we all struggle with this because of the Novus Ordo. The Novus Ordo, the way it is now, some people will say, "Oh, I've seen a Reverend Novus Ordo. I've seen one, right? I've been to one in that city way."
Yeah, but again, it's just not. It's not the preferred option of the mainstream Catholic hierarchy. I mean,
exactly. So that,
you'll always have your one-offs, and that's wonderful. But
so exactly, and so the point is that these one-offs are such an outlier that it almost doesn't even count towards the benefit of the Novus Ordo, like the argument for the Novus Ordo. I mean, I honestly it's
the exception, not the rule.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely the exception. And it because of the options that you have in the Novus Ordo, it can easily go to
endless
it can swing the pendulum from reverent to anything the priest wants, because even Benedict the 16th in his I'll find the writing, but he talks a lot about how some of the rubrics even say, like, how it says was it say the red, do the black, or say the black, do the red? I can't remember which way it is. But he says that some of those rubrics, what tells a priest like to do something, that it almost encourages creativity, and that's a problem. So that's a problem in the liturgy. Here I am as a layman just talking about like the liturgy, right? Like, who am I? Who am I to judge? But
if not you, then who?
Right.
I mean, in a sense,
we can be educated. Is my point. Is that, and we should.
Yeah,
and every lay person, every layman, every father, every husband, every wife.
Well, and the reality
get educated on this.
That the council talked about empowering the laity, right? I feel like the Latin Mass movement is a lay-led movement. I mean, it's a ground-swelling movement with people asking to have access to this wonderful reservoir of faith, of holiness. So, yeah, I mean, if we don't push, if we don't ask for it, if we don't communicate the value we get from it, then they'll keep giving us what they think they need to give us, So, no, I mean, I think, the more people educate themselves and kind of allow themselves to, I mean, I always say, challenge yourself liturgically. Like if you're used to doing something and you're not, like you're not used to going to the Latin Mass, you've never been to a Latin Mass, go and see. Go find out what it's about. Go find out why there are so many people that are in love with it, and just see what you can learn, see what you can get. I think you'll be surprised.
Yeah, Taylor Marshall has a video response to Bishop Barron talking about the traditional Latin Mass and the Second Vatican Council. You want to talk about that video as well, his response?
Sure. I mean, I think, it's no secret Taylor Marshall has hinted, and more than hinted, at the idea that the council was kind of, I mean, I don't think he would say it was all, heretical, but that it was just maybe not helpful, and that it was too ambiguous, and that it kind of has caused tremendous harm. So, sometimes he points to other examples of church history where we just got a do-over. It was just a bad council, and we'll just throw it out. We'll go back, we'll scrape the slate clean, and we'll just, we'll start over, and just kind of pretend like it never happened. So I would say that's a summary of his position. He sees a lot of problematic elements to the council documents, and obviously a lot of problems with the aftermath. And I think he has a lot less trouble blaming the council than I would. And then, of course, he uses kind of Archbishop Vigano's recent comments on the council to kind of, reinforce that. I mean, I think, and again, to summarize Archbishop Vigano's views, which, I mean, you should really just go read them yourself, but it's similar. It's kind of like the council was okay, not great, but it's caused so many issues that we may be better off just excising it from the church. And
it should be dropped and forgotten.
That's right. Dropped and forgotten.
Is what their argument is. Yeah.
Right. So that's their view. And while their view can be attractive at times because there's like this romanticizing of the past and romanticizing of the preconciliar church, I will tell you that I am beginning to learn, I'm trying to learn more about the preconciliar church, because that's another thing. Like, it's hard to come by. It's hard to come by like documents about what it was like. I'm trying to figure out because in order for me to know what the council was fixing, so to speak, I need to know what it was like. And I know I hear people say like, oh, it's terrible. It was just a time filled with fear, a time filled with just angry people everywhere. And that may be the case, but I kind of want to see for myself. I don't want to be told what it was like. I want to kind of hear testimony from people who were alive then, or from books that speak about that time, trying to get a sense for what it was like and what the council was trying to address, because, context is really important. My sense is that there were legitimate grievances, legitimate problems that the council was addressing. And that on the whole, thanks to the Holy Spirit, there definitely was progress that was made in the council. But unfortunately, the aftermath, the implementation was just...
Simply put, while Bishop Barron is arguing, and others, even the Communio route, right? Like, they argue a theological continuity. How do they answer the liturgical discontinuity at the same time?
Yeah, and see, that to me, that's actually, you nailed it right on the head. That's the problem with Vatican II. Theologically, it is squeaky clean. It's perfect.
It's totally in line. There is no preconciliar theology that's different from post-conciliar.
There's some development, but you expect development in doctrine. That's just part of being Catholic. So squeaky clean, I think that you can defend, you need a hermeneutic to understand it, but you can defend what the council said. But the worship element of it. Now again, Sacrosanctum Concilium said nothing that instructed people to dismantle the Roman Rite. But we stand on the other side of this thing in the ruins of the worship of the Western Church. And so I think that's where it all imploded. And here's a problem. I think that we are, as Western Catholics or Roman Catholics, we are a bit too concerned with the theological side of things and not enough concerned with the worship, with the lex orandi of the church, the law of prayer. And so we have allowed, because just because we have right belief doesn't mean we have right worship, right? So technically the Second Vatican Council is right belief, very much so. But the worship aspect of it that came afterwards, which had little to do with the council and more to do with the concilium that was formed afterwards, was honestly a travesty. And it was the systematic destruction of the Roman Rite. And so the law of prayer of the church was abandoned in favor of a completely new artificial one. And that is a real issue. It's not the council documents. It's not the theology in the council. It is the abandonment of the timeless way that the church is worshipped.
Mic drop. That is the hot take of this episode. So get this. If we get our lex credendi from the lex orandi, in other words, Prosper Aquitaine had he created that. He's attributed to that quote, the lex orandi, lex credendi, which is a shorter version of his lex supplicandi. That is, let the law of belief, let the law of prayer confirm what we believe, or this particular belief. And so if we have this theology that is in continuity, but yet shows up this other mass, this is where lex credendi gave birth to lex orandi. And it's not supposed to be that way. It's supposed to be the other way around. Because we call the liturgy the theologia prima, right? The prima theologiae, so to speak, the ontological being of theology. Like, it is not liturgy is not a subspecies of theology, and that's what happened in the council.
Absolutely.
Rather, liturgy is theology itself.
Correct.
And so what we now see, so this is technical, but I try to avoid some of these technical things, but I think this is why the lex orandi, lex credendi, lex vivendi is so important to getting me into the traditional Latin Mass. It's getting it right. We get what we pray for. It's no wonder we have other liturgies like go visit a personal ordinariate of the Chair of St. Peter liturgy. It's the traditional Latin Mass in English for the most part.
Yeah.
They have, and then other aspects of the liturgy as well really hold on to that lex orandi, lex credendi. You can see that, right? Like even the selection of scriptures in the 1-year lectionary versus our lectionary. The 1-year lectionary is supporting dogma, right? Why did Pope Benedict or Cardinal Ratzinger have to come out with a book called Dogma and Preaching? Like, really? Like, we had to we needed a whole book to convince the church to preach dogmas? Right? To teach us the catechism, basically, at the pulpit. I mean, we complain a lot in the Novus Ordo Church. It's just kind of our thing. We complained a lot about not knowing things at the pulpit. Just think of when the pro-life movement really started to pick up, and there were many experiences of the lay Catholics saying, "Father, you need to talk about pro-life. You need to talk about the moral life, moral theology." They didn't get it in the seminary. Seminaries changed drastically, and we see that we have hard data about. So there's lots of things. I guess like the bent that I take, Rafa, just like with you, like we're kind of like Augustine and Aquinas. You take like the Augustine heart view, like you're seeing, the poetic mode of it, and I take the Aquinas almost like I'm looking at the supporting data to the heart. So I'm hoping that we can build a compelling story,
Yeah.
with what we're saying. So
Yeah, but I mean, you hit it right on the head when you say, the issue is that we have divorced theology from the liturgy, that somehow we think that right belief. So as long as we assent to the teaching of the church, we're good. What the liturgy is, can be whatever, as long as we assent to the right belief. And the reality is that on the ground, what that causes is the wasteland that we're living in. I mean, 70% of Catholics don't believe in the real presence. I mean, is that a coincidence? I don't think so. I mean, I think that is a direct result of a mass that stripped away all of the built-in, you could say, ritual reinforcement of ideas of the theology that you're exactly talking about. The minute you strip that away, and the theology erodes right along with it. So yeah, I mean, those two they're not two different things, but the same thing.
yeah, like we need to return to a liturgical catechesis, meaning that just think of how before there was the literacy rate was much lower. I mean, before the Baltimore Catechism, there was not very many accessible English catechisms available, but people knew the faith because of the liturgy.
Yeah.
They knew the faith because the building was like a catechism.
Absolutely. Catechism in stone. I mean, that's what they used to call churches.
Catechism in stone. I've never heard that. That's awesome. And this is how, and the beautiful stained glass. But I'm going to quote Quas Primas from 1925, the document on the establishment of the feast of Christ the King, where the quote is, and I'm going to paraphrase, that the church's teaching power and efficacy is greatest in her feast days. And while she has these infallible pronouncements, they don't, like, those pronouncements happen once, right? And maybe reiterated a generation later. But feast days, from the moment they're proclaimed on earth, they are proclaimed forever. And so they teach forever.
Until they're done away with after the Second Vatican Council.
But yes, yeah. until
But I know what you mean.
Oh yeah. You have the spirit of what I'm talking about.
I mean, that's what I don't understand. Yeah, that's what you like scratch your head at. It's like all these feasts were just like, whoosh, get out of here.
Yeah, and even the way we celebrated them, right? I can, and if any of my friends are listening or watching this, I remember when my friends made our own canopy because we couldn't buy one. You couldn't find the one that looked like it. Like, they even looked different. Like, they were kind of like 70s abstract. Even the candles were, I don't know. You're an architect. What was that style called? Because I call it crap. Like, I don't.
Just 60s modernism.
Yeah, like, exactly. Like, that crept into even the effects of the liturgy.
Absolutely.
The chalices.
I would argue that it was the liturgy that birthed that style. Like, in other words, it's not architecture that infiltrated the liturgy.
Oh, not architecture. Okay, yeah. I would agree with you then. Yeah, no, that's a good clarification. Yeah. But just even, especially as I served as an altar server during the Novus Ordo, and I remember these albs, and I remember loving the day we got cassocks and surplices, and then we even made our own cinctures.
Yeah.
And then we realized when we get married, you can't wear that.
That's right.
Unless you're in the personal ordinary. and you can. We make fun of everyone here. Okay, we made fun of ourselves too. Come on, guys. So yeah, I lost my train of thought there, but
Oh,
yeah,
sorry, Jeff.
there's a lot. There's a lot that goes into it. I mean, it's a very emotional topic for me.
It is. It is. Okay, so we have lamented the downfall of the great Roman Rite, and we have, kind of presented the, the kind of middle of the road position that I think you and I represent, which is the council is totally valid, but that basically the divorce of liturgy and theology was kind of short-sighted. And you have Taylor Marshall that says, we just need a mulligan on this one, right? Okay, so that's the state of the church today. What do we need to do? What would you do, Jeff, Pope Jeff, to fix the church?
Oh boy, first, I want to thank everyone that voted for me, my constituents.
That's right. I'd like to thank my wife and children
for allowing me to become Pope. I hereby resign. Well, what's going to help? Okay. So I'm going to use my indigenous powers and my lay indigenous privilege.
That's right.
To announce that.
Yeah, got to use that lay indigenous privilege.
As a layman, as a father, I look at my children and I want them to stay Catholic. I want them to experience not just something better than what I experienced, but I want them to have the fullness of the beauty of worshiping God through the liturgy. And I want to be part of the process of getting there. So what would fix it is that I get off my butt, I learn the traditional Latin Mass, I learn Gregorian chant, I pass it on to my kids, I build a small altar like you did. I get this going. I live a humble, holy life through being humiliated, through being whatever, through all of that good stuff. And I live in the domestic church, and maybe even creating a domestic monastery where in the home, what I'm trying to do now is incorporate chant. I'm slowly getting there into our prayer, because I want my kids' imagination with the fall of the religious, and I've been mentioning it this whole conversation, they're not going to easily see it. Like, in fact, they'll see a traditional Latin Mass far more than they'll see a religious community.
Mm-hmm.
And I want their imagination I want them to have that kind of imagination of what that could be like, so that if God has a calling for them, it's not shocking because, they're in it for a while and it's too shocking for them, and then they discern out because,
right. It's so different than their lived experience. It
is, right. I want their lived experience to dovetail into their vocation.
I think that's beautiful. I think that's a great goal.
So that's the goal. That's the goal that I have for myself, and I think a lot of other families are doing the same thing. I think you guys are doing the same thing as well. I mean, families will church hop to find that place, to find that pearl of great price. So yeah. What about yourself, Rafa?
Well, I'm going to go full Sede.
Oh,
Just kidding. Well, I think the key to the church restoring its right worship is Summorum Pontificum. I think that Pope Benedict, although he resigned, which I don't understand still. I'm sorry. Sorry, Papa Benedict. But that Summorum Pontificum, and I would even say Anglicanorum Cedibus, which is establishing the ordinariates, did create a flourishing of liturgy like the church hadn't seen in decades. Now you have more access to beautiful liturgies than ever before. And that is a positive development in the church. That's a very hopeful development in the church. I think Summorum Pontificum was right in the following way. So part of the problem with the way the new Mass was implemented It was top down, and it was pretty authoritarian. This is how we're doing it, period. No questions asked, no exceptions. So if you were to turn around and do that with the extraordinary form, you would just be repeating the mistakes of the past. You'd be doing it right back. What I like about what Pope Benedict did is, he said, look, I'm just going to put this right here. And we're just going to watch it grow. We'll water it and we'll just watch it grow, And I firmly believe that if we do what you were saying, which is we foster the traditional Latin Mass as the historic and right and true worship of the Catholic Church, if we foster it, if we try to advance it and try to encourage it in any way that we can, so through our lives, through learning it ourselves, through teaching it to our children, through supporting parishes that are starting it up, etc., we are going to slowly but surely have this blossom into a full movement within the church. And I would say the same thing for the Ordinariate. The Ordinariate is doing a lot of great things. If you could do it all over again, I think the reforms of the Second Vatican Council would look very much like the Ordinariate,
I do, yeah.
And I think there would be a lot less problems and a lot more belief in the real presence. So I think, similarly supporting, fostering, as you and I both are Ordinariate parishioners, and we love it, and our families love it, etc. But supporting these kind of just rich and beautiful forms of worship, liturgical forms of worship, is the way to go. And what we'll find, I think, if we do this, and if we encourage our friends, encourage our family, encourage our children, we'll look back in 50 years, maybe not even that long, and say like, now you end up having the commuter Novus Ordo parishes, and the EF and the extraordinary form parishes and the ordinary parishes are everywhere. I think that is the future of the church. And that's a future that is bright. That's a future that is hopeful. That's a future that I want to be a part of. And in a sense, the church will find itself reconciled to its theology. And I think you could even say reconciled to the true implementation of the Second Vatican Council.
Good. So I'm good with putting a bow tie on that here.
Yeah, man. No, it was good. It was good. I enjoyed the conversation. And, I think also it goes without saying almost, but, pray a lot, especially the Liturgy of the Hours, because that is liturgical. And like, it goes very much with what you were saying. You want to, help your children be open to a vocation by introducing them to the Liturgy of the Hours. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. And that our job as laity, among the work of raising a family and being the imago Dei, right, as husband and wife and with children, right?
Is that like a magician, or what is that?
It's a superpower in Marvel. The image of God, right?
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Imago Dei being the image of God, right? The Father, Son, Holy Spirit, the family, right? Imaging God. Among that, I think it's also we are the seeds of we plant the seeds of the church, right? That blossom into the clergy, the religious. And so every family has to have built into it the lex orandi, lex credendi, lex vivendi of being open to any of those callings, like of other states of life.
Absolutely.
So that means we really, and that's where it's like, oh, that's what the domestic church is. That's what I call the domestic monastery is, right? Like singing these prayers, right, and learning them and going through the hard work. Like if it's hard, how many, I know people who've done keto and been sent to the ER. Like that's hard. That's hard to do keto, and you did it so much that you went to the ER. I mean,
yeah, you're so committed, you went to the ER.
I mean, so if we can do that, if we can do things to our bodies, right? Let's really dig down and challenge ourselves to pray more. Obviously, the rosary. Uh, I think also the liturgy of the hours, like you said, and we can talk more about that in on the next conversation we have. But
Absolutely.
yeah, I'm with you on that. I'll take up that challenge as well.
Sounds great, Jeff. Well, enjoyed it. Until next time.
Alrighty, talk to you later.
Peace out.